command the room. So you go in the room, you act like you have everything all together, you make your statements, but it's not going anywhere. Susy's goal was to get promoted, which has already happened, by the way. Commanding the room wasn't getting her there. Changing the room did. And one of the things that Susy and I worked on was stories. Oh, here we go. Is Rob talking about stories again? Yes, Rob's talking about stories again because it's the most valuable communication tool that there is. If communication is a skill, I believe it's a series of skills. But if communication was a skill, at the top of that skill list would be storytelling. Part of that is just biology and evolution and how we've evolved as a people. Going back to ancient Africa, you may have heard me say this before, but the village elders, the grandmothers, would gather around the campfire and they would share stories with the kids who were coming of age, the kids who were going to have to start hunting, going to have to go get water. The grandmother, the elder, had to share the stories of where the tigers were and the lions were and where the water was. And the stories, their brains, those kids, as they were sitting there around the fire listening to grandma, they started to create a bond with grandma because then it was the essence of survival. These stories were survival. So that survival is really the stack of where we started to learn these skills of storytelling. And it's stuck with us for so many years. And one of the ways that you can change the room rather than command it is by telling stories. Maybe they're your stories, your origin story. Maybe it's stories of successes that you've had or lessons that you've learned, because that's what Susy and I really worked on. So that whiteboard behind me, what I love to do with my clients, I like to call it the whiteboard treatment, is I ask you a bunch of questions, which is fantastic because I have a background as an investigative journalist, an award-winning investigative journalist, if you will. Oh, yeah, I'm so fancy, I know. But I love asking questions. I live life curiously. And in that, we come up with some really interesting things. I usually start with values. What are your values? And then once we really nail down those values, oftentimes I get like 10 or 12 values, which is fine. But our first job is to narrow that down into 3 or 4 so that we have nice filters. And then we start getting into the meat, start getting into the questions that I ask you. And in Susy's case, we talked about her career. We talked about her origin story and how she came from Mexico to the United States with $20 in a pocket, 1 pair of shoes, and 1 suitcase. Didn't know a lick of English, but moved here, learned English fast, got her career going, and has worked her way up the HR ladder since. But that trajectory stalled, which happens so much, right? You're moving up a company, you get to maybe a director level, and then it gets real tough to get to the vice president level or the C-suite level. And that's where Susy deserves to be, and that's where Susy is headed, towards those roles, because she knows how to change the room now. Part of that is in your preparation, what you're bringing to the table. Part of it is the sense that you develop in your preparation and looking at your roster of successes, your roster of failures, your lessons learned, your origin story, looking at the obstacles that you've overcome. And storytelling is just one of the many ways that you can change the room, but that's the goal that I'm always after. Positive influence. That's what I'm always trying to bring to any room. So even if it's a downer type meeting, I want to elevate the energy. I want to change the mood in the room so that people think about what is possible, not the depressing parts of our day or whatever the case may be. I'll give you an example of how I changed a room. So in the radio business, you can make some money by endorsing companies, plumbing company, mortgage lending company, roofing company, you name it. You put your name on it, you write the commercial, you go on air with the commercial, and you try to drive results for a local business. And that was a big advantage and one of the coolest things about being able to do that. When you represent a local company, you're trying to change the room so people pick your roofing company. So you have to communicate that well. And the best way that I found is through story. So one company was a plumbing company. Plumbing company spending a lot of money on my radio group here in Phoenix, Arizona that I work for, one of the big companies, 7 stations. I believe that this plumbing company advertised on 5 of the 7 stations, big spend. It was over a $500,000. It's a big account for us. So they invest all this money into these ads. They pick me as one of the endorsers. They pick several other hosts, but they're not getting the results that they want. So they call this big on hands deck meeting, all hands. So they brought the owner, the marketing team, a couple of other people. On our side, I was there. The other 5, 6 hosts that were endorsing this plumbing company were there. The market president was there. My boss was there. My boss's boss was there. A whole bunch of people from sales. The person who had the account was there. The vice president of sales was there. 2 vice presidents of sales were there. And we do this major whiteboard session, kind of like I do with my clients, the whiteboard treatment. We had all these Post-it notes. See those Post-it notes? I don't know if you can see them back there on the wall. Let's see if I can tilt the camera a little bit, because I know that if you're watching on your phone, you get to see the mark. So you see those Post-it notes back there that are hanging on the wall? We had a bunch of those up in this meeting with the plumbing company. But there was no cohesive connection to all of the great ideas. And there were some really, really good ideas. But I know what happens when I'm in that room and I'm watching all these different people trying to be in command. So this host is trying to be in command because he wants to look good for the owner. And then this host raises her hand and she's trying to look good for the owner. They're in command. They're confident in what they're saying. But here's what I knew. Because there was a bunch of people trying to command the room, including the market president, including the owner, the marketing team, the sales team, all the hosts. Nobody put everything together. And that's when I spotted the opportunity to change the room. Because what I do in my process is that whiteboard there that's behind me. I usually keep a scrap of paper with me or have a notebook with me, and I'm always taking notes. I love taking notes. And this is one of the advantages that my clients get when they work with me. I'm an expert note taker because that helps me connect the dots. And that is what helps you change the room. So one of the ways I always advocate changing the room is take notes. Look for the patterns. Because going back to this meeting with the plumbing company, all the whiteboards up there, all these people trying to command the room, I stand up at the end. There's like 10 minutes left, and I timed it perfectly. And what I did is I summed it all up. I said, okay, so I just want to take a minute here, and I want to spot these patterns and build us a structure so that all of our ads have similarities to them. Because when we have similarities to them, there's cohesion and we're changing the room on air. We're changing people's minds and introducing them to this particular plumbing company. And here in Phoenix, a lot of the plumbing companies do AC work as well. This company does this as well. So they do both plumbing and AC. So they're competing with all kinds of companies. The competition is fierce because, as you know, in Phoenix, in the summertime, it's well over 100 degrees, 112 degrees. AC breaks. You need someone to come and fix it. So many companies ready to give you the deal. But we had to figure out for this plumbing company what the differentiator was. And because I was taking notes, and because I wasn't trying to command the room, I was able to change it because I spotted the pattern. And the pattern was they had a phrase at the time, with us, you pay about half. So that right there is pillar number 1. Pillar number 2 for these ads that we were running was about the owner. The owner is incredibly generous. He's the type of guy that trains his techs, the plumbers, the AC techs, when they go over someone's house. If they spot a need, they won't make you pay. For example, he used to talk about the owner, a single mother, as an example. His tech would go over, and let's say there was a toilet problem, unclog the toilet or fix the toilet in some way, $350. The owner would just write that off. And what I did is I pointed out the owner's attitude, but also that story that comes with it. And then to wrap it all up, the third pillar was telling our own personal stories of using this brand. And it turned out I had just used the brand. I'd used it a couple of times, but I had a major water service line leak when I was on vacation, of all things. So the water spewing all over the street. Luckily, my neighbor called the city. The city came and shut it down. So I'm out of town. So the first thing I do is I got a call from the city. So I talk to the city, and then I immediately call this company. And the owner says to me, you know what? Do me a favor. We're going to come out Monday. He's like, you get back Sunday night. We're going to be there Monday, first thing in the morning. We're going to take care of it. But I want you to get someone else out there to get an estimate, and we'll compare prices. So I did. I called another company, a company that I used to use. They were going to charge me $12,500 to fix the water service line. This company's price was $9,000. So I didn't pay about half, but I saved a third. And it was a really cool process. They brought out this big machine and they drilled these PEX pipes that are not PVC pipes. They're more flexible, I guess. They drilled them into the side of my yard because I live on a slope of a mountain. So they had to drill it in. It was so cool to watch. But when I got up in this meeting with all these Post-it notes and all these people trying to command the room, and I'm telling this story, I see the change happen. My own personal use of this company. That's a differentiator, along with the owner's attitude and the fact that you're going to pay about half. So we get to tell these stories is what I told this group, and we should tell these stories often. And you know what happened after that meeting? I was the man. I will say it that way. The market president came up to me, completely impressed that I was able to pull all of the threads and put them together in one package. Because you got to remember, ads are either 30 seconds typically or 60 seconds. These were 60-second ads. You can only say so much in 60 seconds. You really have the pressure to be effective and be effective quickly. But with this formula, pay about half, talk about the owner, talk about your personal story, everything came together. The market president comes up to me. The owner came up to me, was like all smiles, happy as could be, because he felt confident that the meeting had a purpose. He felt confident that the ads were going to work the way that they wanted them to work. That is how you can change a room. If you're commanding the room, it's all about you, right? Getting back to that point. All eyes on you, and that's great until it's not. Because there's a fine line between being command and being annoying. But aiming to change the room, that's how you really make a difference for yourself, like Susy did. Got promoted, being eyed for another one, getting looks from other companies. So, yeah, you have these opportunities every single day. I'll give you another example. A small business owner that I work with, Melissa. She runs an outfit that helps artists fundraise. Melissa's an expert fundraiser, has worked on billion-dollar fundraising campaigns. She said to me, you know, Rob, I get a chance to speak in front of audiences about my business. And I know I'm falling short because I sound like a robot because I'm reading a script. And I think changing the room is really about being unscripted. And I am a big advocate of being unscripted. A lot of people I work with are speakers too, and they come to me with a script and they want to memorize the script. And I'm like, memorization is very hard to do. I've taken some acting classes, tried to memorize lines. Man, it's hard, especially when you get lost in your thoughts and you're trying to find the memorized lines versus how I build speeches is through pillars, right? I have a beginning and an end. And then what are my 3 points that I want to make? And what stories can I tell to support those 3 pillars? So I worked with Melissa, got her off the script, got her to tell her amazing origin story. And I got to tell you, it wowed the crowd, still wows the crowd to this day. And her business doubled, and then it tripled, and it even quadrupled. She had to change her entire business structure because she was so good at talking about her business and her why. And the reason I bring up the origin story, a lot of people shy away from telling stories, their own stories, their origin stories, because you sound like a braggart. That's some other advice that you gave, that you've heard before. Don't never talk about yourself. Baloney. Talk about yourself. You have to. You have to, because that's how I know you. That's how I begin to trust you, because if you're trying to advance your career or grow your business, if you're just trying to be a more effective communicator, it's all about trust. And when you aim to change the room, move the room, make the room feel something, feel good, feel a positive influence, when you do that, that's when you're really in command because you're not trying to command everybody else in the room like it's the army. It's not the army. You're just trying to approach things differently than everyone else is because everyone else has been told to command the room. So go back to this idea that you're not supposed to talk about yourself. In Melissa's case, the reason she founded her company is her origin story. And that is what connects the audience to her. And then here's what happens. This is why I love origin stories. I use Star Wars as an example. And if you want to dig deeper into storytelling, my storytelling course, the Cassette Tape Stories, is perfect for you because it gives you the 7 great elements of great stories. And you can work on your origin story as you go through the course. So by the end of it, you're going to be ready to rock and roll. And here's the other best part about it. 7 tracks. It runs about 2 hours long. So in less time than you read a book, you're ready to rock and roll with some badass stories, your stories. And I want to hear your stories, just like I wanted to hear Melissa's story. And I won't share too many details with you here, but it is a story of loss and a story of honor in honoring that loss that Melissa had. So she tells that origin story, and that connection happens, just like when you watch Star Wars. And that's an example you'll see in the Cassette Tape Stories if you go to cassettetapestories.com. So I love this. Have you heard of the hero's journey? Maybe you have at this point. The hero's journey is the storytelling blueprint that George Lucas used in Star Wars. And the hero's journey blueprint is all about how a guide meets the hero. Guide helps the hero go off on the hero's adventure. In Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is the hero. But he can't become the hero without Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan is the guide. So when Melissa is telling her story, she is acting as the guide and saying, I've been through this. I know what I'm doing. I'm a fundraising badass, and I will help you get your project done because one of the biggest challenges so many artists face, filmmakers, documentary makers, lack of funding to get their movie done or their project finished. That's what Melissa's so good at. So she teaches you the method, points you in the right direction, and gets you going. So as she's talking about her origin story, she's also telling you her philosophies. And then you can see yourself, and you're in the audience, you see yourself working with her and understanding, oh, okay, she's the Obi-Wan, I'm the Luke. Same thing I was doing with the plumbing commercials. I have the experience. So when I'm Rob Hunter for plumbing company ABC, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi because I've already used the service. I know the service. I trust the service. And because I trust the service, you can trust the service. So you see how those things connect. And you see how Melissa, instead of trying to command the room and be perfect with her script and say the exact lines at the right place in the right time, she worked on changing the room. And every room she goes in now is changed after hearing her stories, her ideas. And she gets to add in some of the success stories that she's working on. Success stories of artists that are getting their projects across the finish line. The same way that I get to tell you about Melissa and about Susy and about some of my other clients in the work that we do to change the room. So there's your homework assignment for the day. Forget the advice you've heard of commanding the room because that's not going to get you anywhere. It might get you noticed, but it might also annoy everyone. Whereas if you work and focus on changing the room, oh man, nobody can stop you then. My name is Rob Hunter, 27-year radio broadcaster. Now what I do is I work with people just like you to improve your communication, to change the room so you can change your game and so that you achieve your goals. Because this thing I learned about myself and a lot of my clients, Hardworking, as we were told to be. But hardworking often because we love the work. I loved my radio work. Susy loves her work with people. Melissa loves her work. Maybe you do too. When you love your work and you work hard, you want to get rewarded for it. And oftentimes you don't because the status quo is always in the way. The status quo loves you where you're at. They love it when you're hard working. They don't have to pay you more money. They love it when you're hard working doing the jobs of two people and they don't have to promote you because that's the way the world works. The way the world works is safety, is comfort, is conformity. That's where that command the room comes from because you think by commanding, you're breaking through the conformity. You're not because everyone's heard that advice. So you're in a meeting with 10 people, 6 of them are trying to command the room. That's conformity. If you're trying to change the room, you're going to be one of 10 in that room. So keep that in mind in your next meeting, your next live, your next piece of content. How are you trying to change the room in a positive direction? Because that is how you take that hard work and you take those actions that you thought spoke louder than words, but turned out actions are silent. How do you take that hard work? How do you take those actions? How do you put them in play so that you achieve your goals? Because hard work, taking the right actions, might mean on paper you're successful and you might feel good about being successful. I always felt good about my success, but I knew I had more in me and I knew I had more to give. And I'll wrap it up on this note. I really learned this change the room lesson during the pandemic. I was broadcasting in Phoenix. I had just gotten an afternoon show with my big brother, Mike Russell, my main man. And we got to do a show together. It was like a dream come true. It was the coolest thing. The first day of our show was March 9th, 2020. A week later is when everything shut down. So we had to switch gears quickly. And in that switching gears, listening to most of the media's approach on the pandemic, where, let's just face it, media's two sides. There's one side and there's the other side. Both of those sides were telling you what to do. I was not. I was telling you what I was doing and how I was adjusting to this new normal, living through our first pandemic of our lives. What I was doing that was successful, what I was doing that wasn't. And that, trying to change the room, is what helped boost the ratings. Because in my career, my ratings were always fine. They were good. I had doubled my audience in New Orleans in 6 months. That's a huge accomplishment. I mean, granted, we were a small station. We started low, but the fact that I doubled it in 6 months leading up to Katrina was pretty damn impressive. And then I was in New Mexico. I was number 1. That was great. And I came to Phoenix. And the first opportunities I got in Phoenix were 7th, 6th. But I had never cracked the top 5 until I stopped trying to command the mic, in my case, the room, which might be your car if you were listening to me on the way home. And I started to change the energy in the room, change the energy I brought into the studio with me so it came out of the microphone. And once I did that, 3 months after the pandemic, we were number 1 and we stayed there mostly until I walked away from broadcasting at the end of 2023. The focus on changing the room is how you go from successful but short of your goals to getting across that line, whatever your goals are. And whatever they are, let me know. My name is Rob Hunter. I'm available here for you on Substack, on all the socials, down to chat. I love the chat feature on Substack. So if you have any questions, either type them in the comments or hit me up in the DM. And if you want to buy the cassette tape stories, it is ready for you so you can rock it and you can start changing the rooms. Until next time, talk to you real soon. It's the ROBOUT. Cheers.